future trends, deep insights, industry leaders. This is the iGaming Next podcast with your host, Pierre Lindh.
Tsachi Maimon, CEO, how's it going?
Hi, how are you, Pierre?
I'm great. We were just saying before here, I'm sitting here in Malta. I'm at the office today actually, but you're in Madrid at the co-working space over there.
Yes, I would like to do again what we did in the past, having such discussions on a coffee, but we can do it remotely now from Madrid. Yes.
Yeah,
I moved
exactly.
here around 8 months ago, so it's really interesting to do it from here.
Yeah, and I'm fascinated by generally current trends and where the world is going, and COVID obviously sped up a lot of development on the digital side of things that anyway kind of would have happened. And yes, like you're saying, we've had some nice boat trips out, you and me. We have met a lot of times in person, and that's always preferable, but better than nothing, than meeting digitally here as well. But I would love to start off today just by having a discussion around this remote work setup that Aspire Global have implemented, and particularly yourself. You're the CEO of a listed organization, and you live in Madrid, which obviously, as far as I know, Aspire Global doesn't have an office in Madrid. And you still manage to produce incredibly good numbers for Aspire. I'm following the stock price up 400% over the last year, and things are going great obviously, and so yes, can you talk me through this? Like, how did this decision come about? Were you nervous kind of going really remote, and what's your learning so far?
So I can tell you that nervous is it's the opposite than nervousness, because it's the ability, when you work in distance, one of the straight rules that we had is to still do every call with a video. So you find out that you see the employees more than you saw them before. Because, if you are having those video calls, and doesn't matter if you're now in the middle of lunch or just in the stairs to the second floor. So the video calls, bringing it to be together. So I think it was great or positive trigger by the COVID that I could go and work from whenever I want, and also to have more abilities to recruit employees. Doesn't matter where they are. So I think it was challenging in the first few weeks, but since then it's a different world, really, and for the positive way.
Yeah, super interesting. We are like you guys are the pioneers here in like a paradigm shift that I'm sure will be talked about in some decennia. The first movers who were brave enough to take this step to become a remote first organization. And our neighbor here, we are in an office hotel. Our neighbors are Playtech, which is a leading iGaming affiliate. They also took the same step to become fully remote. And Oscar, the CEO there, he talked about the same as you mentioned here, the ability to attract talent, not just from the 15-kilometer radius of being around the office, but rather to reach out to entire Europe, for example. And all of a sudden you can cast your net a lot wider. Is that like how has your experience been in that regard, just being able to kind of attract talent to Aspire Global?
So when a company is growing, for example, with Aspire, we grew from around 150 employees 3-4 years ago to more than 500 right now, with the additional companies that we acquired. So there is this pain of growth. You want to recruit more talent, more people. But as you said, we wanted to do it in the area of the offices that we had, and I think that we saw that we cannot fulfill the roles fast enough. So what we did is opening up every or any role that we have. Doesn't matter where you are. You have two hands, you can type, you have a good mindset, you are creative enough, join on board. So this is the state of mind. And this is how we are acting in the last few months.
Very, very interesting. I mean, I can just say for my own little bubble here in our company, even us as a events and media organization also took this step now to become remote first as an organization, and we're only 15 employees now, so not a multi global corporation, but still, from our end, we had the same challenges as well, that the talent pool for us was very small and limited, and when we opened up to become remote first, all of a sudden the doors open to employ a lot more skillful people. But it also put a lot of pressure on us, even as a small organization, to update our procedures. So rather than having weekly meetings in the office next door, and you have these kind of ongoing chats, next to each other at the office and so on and so forth, it put a lot more pressure to kind of update those structures to bring in more transparency into the organization. And how do we do that in a remote first setting? And have you guys had these like pain points as well, where you have kind of had to reimagine how people align with each other?
So it's a great point that when you said about sharpening a little bit the protocols and processes. So when you don't see everyone face to face, and you see them on the video and in a distance, so we needed also to ramp up the leadership in the company to see how we are taking that also to the next level, because obviously it needs to create a different style of management, different aspects of procedures, especially if it's a big organization. So what we did is, firstly, to take the management and to train ourselves what needs to be changed, what needs to be improved in order to do it better, because it's not only to take a laptop and to work in a distance. You need to do it in a good, positive, motivated way to the employees. And I want to say another thing, that usually a lot of companies are investing a lot also in the management. What we did, because we saw that it doesn't going to end when the pandemic ends, we took a step further with the mid-management of the company. It's a layer of around 25 employees that are between the management to the entry level, and those are the future management of the company. And we are investing a lot in this tier in order to make sure that they are in their own organic team are able to manage it in an efficient way. So yes, it is challenged, but very refreshing to the employees. Yeah. Imagine, usually we talk business. Now it's how to do the business and focusing on how to do it, which is refreshing to those managers. So it's created good motivation for them.
Yeah, really interesting, because it's it's been done in the traditional way for a long time. How you encourage your managers to take care of their teams with team buildings, and being there for them, always being first at the office, and being in front and so on. And now all of a sudden, it's a new way of being a leader almost, in a digital environment. Like you can be a great leader perhaps in person, but not the best leader in a digital environment. And understanding those dynamics, I guess it's going to be going to drive the next generation here of leaders as we go forward.
Yeah, it's exactly that. If before, in order to show quality to your manager, one of the parameters probably were I want to be in the office a lot, so everybody see me, I see everyone, to come early, to be present in all the meetings. And now it took it and put quality into the dynamic. You don't need, we even don't count on the vacations that people are taking because they are committed to the delivery of what they need to do. Yeah,
that's so interesting. So it's like it becomes like the only thing that matters is the outcome, really. Like the only thing that matters is what you produce, and kind of how you produce that is up to you as an individual, as long as you deliver.
Exactly. So it gives a lot of strength and power and authority to a lot of layers that before were dependent on their boss. So it's good for us in this timing. It helps us a lot.
Yeah, very cool. And so Tsachi, like, can you talk a bit more, like, you know, what like before this decision came into play? Obviously, a pandemic hit last year. You know, everyone was wanted to kind of figure out how are we going to tackle this situation and so on and so forth. Like, can you talk a bit, like, what were, from operational hindsight, like, what did you learn from COVID in general? Like, did you have any, like, organizationally, was this a quite straightforward change where you went remote and you just noticed straight away everything's working great, or did you have any challenges along the way?
The majority of the challenges that we had is on the security level. To ask ourselves 10 times more questions if the security that we have of the laptops, of the mobile, of the information transferred from each one to another, is it in the right secure way and in the standard that we had prior to having all the company working remotely. So this point is where we focused a lot in the beginning of the pandemic, and all the time do those penetration check and jumping on the different laptops of employees to make sure that nothing is being leaked out. So this is the majority of the challenge, and we invested much more in security in 2020 than we invested before.
That's interesting to hear, you know, and I guess it's also spurred on by the fact that it feels like just these company hacks are on the rise in general. You hear quite a lot, you know. There was the SolarWind hack, obviously, that came to light in December. I don't know if you're aware of that situation, but it really exposes how you know, how fragile the system is security-wise. That the SolarWind hack was basically it's basically, the long story short, it was like a group of Russian state-sponsored hackers. That is the leading theory, at least, that managed to hack a security company and thereby getting access to all the clients of this IT security company called SolarWind. Then thereby getting access to unknown amounts of data to most of the tech companies and government institutions in the United States. You know,
So it started probably happening more and more in the beginning of the pandemic, and I can tell you that it also happened in our industry. I think it was a very known issue of SB Tech that were hacked and were not available for their operators for, I think, around between a week to 2 weeks, which is
a disaster,
a real crisis to manage. So I think it was also a trigger to make sure that everything is connected, that nothing is, you know, you never know, you know, what the hacker is preparing, but at least it took it to be in a much more in the focus than it was before.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, it's the more a complex an organization becomes, especially an IT company, the more potential weak points there are as well, right? And this is enough with one weak point. And there was like this famous example recently. There was a company that got hacked through the thermostat of an aquarium in the office. You know, who would have? But that aquarium was like connected to the Wi-Fi, and then through the Wi-Fi managed to it's like that was the weak point. It doesn't matter then if you invest 500 million in.
When you see the trend of the security budget in our company, for example, so the security officer 3 years ago was happy with 150,000 euro budget. Yeah. Now it's closer to the million, and he's disappointed. He wants more.
Yes. We all want more, I guess. Brilliant, Tsachi. From one thing to the other here, it'd be really interesting to hear. Thank you, by the way. You were in our panel last week at the digital event here discussing the meteoric rise of. You were in one of the panels here last week, and I'm really curious to hear your take on just the meteoric rise on the investments into the gaming industry in general. We've seen, Aspire Global, for example, up 400% more or less over the last year and a half or so. That is also followed by most of the other operators and suppliers of the industry. Evolution is a China example here, of course, and others as well. Can the meteoric rise continue?
It's the trend is continuing, and we see it. But I think that the triggers for it are coming from unexpected reasons. One trigger is the move of the land-based to the online. So if before they did it in their own way and they didn't see the stress to do it, so now they are much more stressed to move online. So I think this is one of the triggers to continue the rise of the iGaming. And the second is the regulations that are happening in Europe are triggering a lot of operators to look outside of their comfort zone. And this is where I think the emerging markets are coming into effect, where now companies are looking how to grow in Colombia and how to grow in Latin America, and America as a whole, and maybe in Africa, before Africa was, maybe in 10 years we will go in. So I think those two triggers of land-based moving to online and operators looking for the new income stream in emerging markets will make the trend of iGaming growth to continue.
Right, interesting. So it's the geographical diversification here that is the key to this meteoric rise. So looking back a couple of years, you had the operators like LeoVegas, the Betsons, and so forth, very focused on a certain key markets. Let's say like LeoVegas, the top 3 markets were a massive lion's share of their revenue. And what you're saying now is basically that I guess maybe we should thank Sweden in some respect for regulating and basically making it clear to everyone that overnight things can change very rapidly in a market. And in the landscape that we look at now, you have to diversify in order to protect the revenue, but also then there are these opportunities in the emerging markets, like you mentioned, Africa, LATAM, and so on and so forth. Like, how has your, first of all, like, does this make sense? What I'm saying? Did you notice this as well from the Swedish regulation came into play, and have your mindset changed?
It's a combination of Sweden, but not only. I think it was Sweden. 4 markets did a big movement or change in the last 2 years. Sweden is one of them. Netherlands is the second. Germany, with the last 6 months, limiting the players a lot and having a slowdown between one bet to another, removing a live dealer in the beginning, and the UK. So it's those 4 markets in Europe that were where everybody focused in the last 5 years. I think pushed a lot of operators to do one of the two. One is to look outside in those emerging markets, which the growth will happen there, but a little bit slower. And second, to do acquisitions, like the Betson acquiring Gig, like Leo Vegas acquiring Xpact, I think, is the sports operator. I forgot the name. So to do acquisitions in Europe in order to not to have a slowdown in income in Europe. So yeah, this is how I see the trend right now.
Right. Interesting. And so obviously you would think that in the emerging markets, Latam, North America, Africa, Asia, there is a lot more work to do there. Essentially, like what are for Aspire? What are the most interesting emerging markets that you see?
So if I will zoom in on Africa, for example, in Africa you cannot go and just open a brand, have a strong marketing team, and do TV campaigns and affiliation and grow. It doesn't work like this. It's different. You need more connection to the retail. You need to have retail products in order to engage with the local market even better. So this is something that we see, at least in Aspire, the advantage of having products that are matching to this local market. This is in Africa. If I will go to North America, North America is not only the US market, it's also the Canadian market with the lotteries inside, the states inside going, online slowly. So you need to have a very broad due diligence on the company. And you need to commit to a lot of things. So there are different aspects of preparation from a company perspective if you want to approach those emerging markets. It's not just to copy the European product, change the language, add currency, and that's all. Even another, I will give you another example, which is people don't think about it, but the scalability of the product, having able to receive in Africa, for example, let's take Nigeria. The average bet in Nigeria can be 0.1 cent per dollar. Now you have hundreds of thousands of players playing, so you need your IT infrastructure, whether it's in the cloud or on-premise, to be able to accept those hundreds or millions of players playing each one of them 0.1 or 2 cent euro. So it's a lot of aspects that need to take into consideration when you enter those markets.
Yeah, and it adds a lot of complexity to the organization. I would imagine, like, this diversification is not for smaller operators, and by the sounds of it, like you need to treat the emerging markets very individually, right? They all have their own requirements, and operationally you need to be an expert in all this field, and it's difficult to tackle the entire world, I would imagine, with these services.
The same operation, yeah, it's totally like this. So it's an opportunity to grow, but it's triggering you to think differently a little bit, not to be innovative in the product. You don't need to be innovative, but to approach it differently, because things that are less important in Europe are a must in those markets.
Yeah. And Tsachi, I mean, maybe it's a bit naive statement or whatever, but I really, I've been in the industry for a long time as well, since 2005 or something along those lines, and in and around, and I've seen the industry grow, and it's very much been a feeling that it's been a constant honeymoon for the iGaming industry for a very long time, until the European markets became locally regulated. And you were in that panel that we had just before the pandemic that was actually titled this, or is the honeymoon over?
The end of the honeymoon, yes.
Right. And it was very much feeling that, like, now the honeymoon is over about a year and a half ago, and now it's time for the real competence to shine. How can we start diversifying the revenue streams. And in fact, 2019 was not the best year for the industry. Declining revenues and so forth. But it seems a lot like the industry have adapted now into this diversification. Do you get the same feeling as well?
I get the same feeling, but I think that one of the items that I mentioned in that panel, and I'm happy that it's proving to be to prove itself, is that there are two aspects. One is to go from the honeymoon to another honeymoon of unregulated markets, and to try and generate those revenues and profit in those unregulated markets. I think differently because it's a very short term. I think that the companies that the wave of regulation, the wave is here, and it's going to go all over the place. All the markets, all the countries, at the end, will be regulated. Whether it will take 2 years, 5 years, or 15 years, or 30 years, they will be regulated. There will be some challenges. And as early as the companies will be able to change the state of mind and think really long term, so they will be in a very good, strong honeymoon few years from now, really, because it will be only them. The unregulated and the black are shrinking. You can do a lot of income there in the short term.
Yeah.
But the availability, the potential is only shrinking as the time goes by. Also Sweden. Everybody talks about the fact that 60-70% of the market only is regulated. Okay.
Exactly.
So maybe in 2-3 years, the government will change the rules and it will go up again to 89%. It will happen. It will not stay 50% forever. So if you want to take advantage and win now with the unregulated in Sweden, do it. But it will not last forever.
Right. That being said, Germany obviously imposing the 5.3% tax on turnover, which is seen by the industry, I presume, as completely unrealistic, let's say, and it will only hurt the players. How do you view future profitability in Germany with this seemingly unrealistic tax?
So I will answer through two different aspects. One, Germany is probably not the country that someone wants to play with and to try and do it, on not on the right and legal aspect. Germany is not a small country that you want to fool and then everybody can do it. So from that perspective, I think a lot of operators in the long term will need to be, nobody wants to take on himself a risk that he will not be able to fly in Europe because of not applying the bet limits. This is one thing. The second, it's also the taxing that you mentioned is triggering companies to try and think differently. I'm not about, and I think that you would be happy if I was sharing here the formula and the secret of how Aspire is going to have a very taxed, very positive and effective low tax in Germany. We're filling on all the rules. We are keeping it for the last moment in order to see how we can gain operators taking our product. But if you will think out of the box, there are ways to do those 5% on turnover, not as dramatic as it sounds.
Wow, that's interesting. So keep an eye on what's going to be announced at some point, then, in other words.
Yeah, we are going to do it on a one-on-one with operators to give them the simulation of how the tax is going to be calculated and done. And to hope and gain a lot of operators taking our products because of it.
Yeah, that's interesting. So this can generate a competitive advantage, really. It's so interesting. It's like some people, they see a problem, and you see an opportunity here.
It's an opportunity, and it's also taking advantage of the fact that Aspire Global today own the full value chain of products. So we are able to think together, all of us, inside the group of companies and products. And when we are coming up with a solution, so fast enough, everybody can contribute their development, their mindset into this feature, this solution, and to do it fast. And so we are going to take advantage of that. Yeah.
But I mean, honestly, this is literally what distinguishes, mediocre companies in general from successful companies. It's like when some people see problems, others see opportunities. And we see that so clearly now during the pandemic as well. Some companies, some individuals, they do see a problem. They take a step back, or they slow down, or they
go to the black market.
They go to the black market, right? Yes. And then others just face it head on and like, no, this is an opportunity for us to have a competitive advantage. I love hearing this type of initiative. So yeah, congratulations on that side. It'll be interesting to follow up on this perhaps at some point when you can talk more about it. But interesting to hear. And I just want to nail down the point you mentioned as well about Germany not being a country that you want to circumvent, let's say, or try to go around. I know as well, from I know personal friends actually, and people in the industry who have gotten legal letters from the German state, basically threatening not the company but the individuals who work within the company with legal action. And that is not a fun letter to get, if you're an employee within an organization, of course.
Exactly.
So you're absolutely right.
I totally agree. Yeah. So people will need to be pushed to do things differently and not run to the known solutions they did for other markets.
Absolutely. Another thing I'm really curious about, jumping over the pond here to the other side of the Atlantic, is the US market. And I did a podcast with your good friend Dima Riederman here the other week, actually. We talked a lot about the US with BtoBet, obviously, that you acquired last year, entering the US market on a B2B level. So I would love to ask you again, just on a Aspire Global, from a global level of your organization, is your strategy within US to enter it as a B2B only, or are you also interested in entering as a B2C?
So in regards to Aspire Global in the US market, there are two things that we wanted to be prepared with before we are entering to the US market. One of them is that you cannot enter to this market with only one product. If you have only gaming platform, or you have only casino content, or only a sports solution. I think that it's important to enter this market with more than one product, especially for a company in our size that is not the biggest company in the world, not yet. So this is why we acquired Pariplay with quality content games and aggregation, and we acquired BtoBet, and that we have sport. We have our historical gaming platform and managed services. So now we are entering with all those products into the US, and if an operator wants one product, perfect. We will try to sell as many in order to increase the wallet share in each operator. This is one thing. The second thing that is interesting in the US, and you asked about how to enter, if it's B2C or B2B, it's a very B2C market. And you can see those 10 operators in the US that are controlling around 75–80% of the GGR. So to enter as an operator, or to be with a B2C operation, it's not easy. And you probably will not be able to take market share from those 10 huge operators. So the strategy of Aspire is not to focus on those 10 operators that will control 75% of the GGR. We want to be the number one that control the 25% of the GGR that the tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 operators will want to engage with. Because
on a B2B level. Yeah.
On a B2B level, because think about it. Also, those 10 operators, at the end, if it will take 1 year or 2 years or 3, they will want to own their own technology. They don't want to buy their technology year after year. It doesn't make sense for them. And the US operators think differently than Europe. They will own their technology. So we don't want to engage with a tier 1 operator, and then after a year, he will buy his own product. So we are tackling the B2B only, and the 25% market share that will not be owned by the tier 1 operators.
Interesting. I mean, it must have been some pretty lengthy discussions within your offices to are we going to enter B2C level? Because the market is dominated by these massive, let's say top 10 operators, and to enter the US market on a B2C level, I heard some estimate now. I think it was Morgan Stanley, the guy from Morgan Stanley in the event last week at iGaming Next, who mentioned that they don't expect profitability until 2024, something along those lines. But now we're talking about not just not expecting profitability, but at the moment there is some massive losses that they are making in order to gain that profitability in 2024. It's not easy, obviously, to carry those losses, especially if you're not the biggest in the world yet.
Of course, and they are acquiring players with a cost of acquisition that is not connected to the value of what this player will generate. Not connected. It's not even close. So if you say 2024, if I were them, I would buy this prediction for 2024. If they will continue as it is, it will be even more than that, because they want only market share right now. And they will do so through marketing, heavy marketing, and they will want to acquire their own technology. See DraftKings. Think about Aspire, that if I was able to have a sportsbook, my sportsbook, being sold to DraftKings, and then they were acquiring SBTech. It's not easy. Now to have this amount of royalties being received by DraftKings going away. And DraftKings is the first one. Bally Games is the second. Now do those 10 operators one by one. In the next 2 years, one by one. This is how I see it.
Yeah. It makes sense. And the US market is changing the dynamics of how an operator operates. I guess, like you were saying, the DraftKings and the FanDuels and the MGMs and so on and so forth, they want to control the operation from all angles, right? They don't want to work with suppliers.
And this is one thing, they want to control it, and until they will control it, they will squeeze the price of the third-party technology they are using. So this was the main reason for Aspire when we entered the US. We want to have many products and services, so we will be able to sell not only one that will be squeezed in the price. If we will take 5 of our products, we are able to give him a good price if he's taking more products from us. So it's a different aspect than the rest of the world. It's interesting, and there's been the Betssons, the Leo Vegas, the Kindred, obviously, who would be seen as tier 2 operators, I would guess, who are entering that market. They do press releases. They get some good PR, and investors are happy and so on and so forth. But it's not necessarily a straightforward win. Let's say you could make the argument that it's a bit of a gamble for these operators to invest so heavily, especially when they are not, like I said, the tier 1s, right? And it's a double risk, Pierre. It's a double risk because from one side, it doesn't mean that if they are entering the door of the US, they will be as successful as they were in Europe. This is one risk. And the second risk is in Europe, because you are now shifting your focus into a different jurisdiction, very big difference in time zone, and you are about to not forget, but to treat differently to your bread and butter. So if companies will not do it in the right way, it's a very risky step to the future.
Yeah, so interesting with the US dynamics just changing the industry like this, and really, you know, organizations are choosing now very difficult decisions that will basically lay the foundation of the future of the organizations in one way or the other, and because it's a commitment, you know, it will change the organizations. And you know, that leads me to another question for you, Tsachi. You know, what is the vision for Aspire Global in the long term here? Because for me, it sounds very much like, I think if I remember the last quarterly report right, I think you have something like 2/3 of your revenue coming from B2B and 1/3 from B2C. And it sounds very much, you know, you're acquiring on the B2B side, you're going into the US on the B2B side. Is the future of Aspire Global more and more on the B2B side in general, you feel? And in general, what's your vision, you know, for the organization?
So the vision is to be one of the biggest gaming suppliers in the world, really. And we know that in order to do it, we will probably need to have more than 1, 2, 3 products. This is why we acquired Pariplay. This is why we acquired BtoBet. And this is why we will not end the story here. We will continue to acquire more products that we will feel giving us the ability to control more in the value chain and offer more products that anyone can take it, doesn't matter where he is in the globe. This is one thing. And in order to support it, we need to focus even more on the technology, on the quality of it, or how to prepare it to the different regulated markets. So this is why we, 2 months ago, a little bit maybe less than 2 months ago, we released a press release about reviewing our B2C in Aspire Global. So this is on the table right now. We are reviewing it with different angles, what to do with the B2C, how to, from one point of view, enabling Aspire to focus more on the technology and the B2B products, and from the other side, not to arm the B2C because it is growing nicely, especially after everybody saw the Q1 where the B2C is really rising nicely, so to continue the growth of the B2C. Yeah. So the question is how to do it in the best way possible. So to answer your question, our vision is on the B2B side. We are considering how to review the B2C on that perspective. And we really look forward to be in that size that you will talk to me. We will do another coffee in 4 or 5 years from now, and you will see, wow, it's a huge company that you used to see our 1-floor office 5 years ago, and now it's something different.
You have your own tower, the Tsachi Tower. Yeah.
So we are working hard to execute the strategy. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. So so the strategy, the business development is largely happening on the B2B side here, but then again maintaining B2C and ensuring that the numbers still deliver and so on and so forth. So it sounds a little bit like you are kind of heading towards a position like Playtech-ish kind of thing, where it's doing both B2B, B2C. Obviously, they have a $2 billion market cap, something along those lines. And your vision here is essentially to become one of the biggest ones.
Yes,
if I understand.
Yes, and interesting about Playtech that you mentioned, their valuation decreased dramatically from the 3 billion that they were to around 1.4, 1.3 or something like that.
All right, around there, yeah.
Mainly because their big chunk of income was coming from Asia. And when you're doing it in Asia, in an unregulated dynamic, one operator or 2 operators can switch in one day their revenues. This is what happened with Playtech. So it's shrinking their valuation towards the shareholders. And by the way, Playtech is perceived as a B2B company, but the majority of the income, just so you know, it's amazing how they are perceived, but the majority is B2C.
Yeah. All right. I didn't know that, actually. Interesting. And that drives down the point, I guess, which is, as you mentioned, you could choose to go onto the unregulated markets, but naturally that could very well turn out to be a short-term strategy, as we have seen here with Playtech. I mean, there are great people there working there, and I know that their strategies to kind of turn that around.
I used to work.
Oh, you used to work at Playtech. All right, interesting. That's the background. I didn't know that about you.
Yes.
What did you do at Playtech?
I was their head of, Playtech had B2B and B2C. So for their B2C, I was the head of casino back then.
Oh, right.
Yes.
Interesting. Fun fact. No, and there's great people there, and I know that Playtech have had a certain reputation, and I know that they have trying to turn that around, and sometimes you have to take a step back in order to take 2 steps forward.
Exactly.
So I'm sure they are keeping a close eye on what you guys are doing then as well, and the former employee taking over. And interesting. That leads into the topic of ESG, I think, quite closely here, because I think that ESG is, the rise of ESG-led investments is something that have hurt the iGaming industry in the last 7 or 8 years or so. And largely because of this, the industry hasn't been responsible at large with gaining a lot of revenue from unregulated markets, not the best track record in protecting its players, and so on and so forth. And however, you start seeing now that a lot more listed organizations are really starting to take ESG driven agendas seriously. So I'd love to ask you, what's your take on ESG in general, where the trend is heading, where is the future, and also how do you guys tackle this as Aspire Global? Because it's a difficult thing for an individual iGaming company to fight against.
It's correct. It's not an easy thing that you woke up in the morning and thought about it back then.
Yeah.
Luckily for Aspire, we are listed in the Stockholm Stock Exchange, and I can say that the Swedish Stock Exchange was on par from other stock exchanges in Europe, also in the US, and they were the one to lead the way. So what we see now from several companies, Aspire Global already presented to investors 2 years ago our program and planning and projects in the environmental and any social and government initiative that we have. This year, it was the second year that we released in the annual report our sustainability report,
right.
Very thorough one, this being managed by Lisbeth, that is doing a great job by taking the company state of mind and shifting it that we can succeed even with it. See it as an opportunity how to do it in a better way. And she's doing it amazing. She's teaching me and the board how to do it.
And she teaches me as well. I mean, she always comes into our chats, to iGaming Next Clubhouse chats and everything. Always out there to promote. Like really thumbs up to Lisbeth Oost.
Yes, and she understands the fear of the operation to lose income because of it. And with her calmness and creativity and taking us step by step. So I think that the status of where Aspire Global is now, because of those two things. One is Sweden being really advanced in that aspect, and the management that we put in place with Lisbeth, we were showing good results from that perspective.
Yeah. Sweden leading the way, like always.
In some aspects.
In some aspect, yeah. Okay, let's stop the debate. But so on the ESG side, I think it's interesting. I mean, so we've seen the outflux of capital from ESG funds and banks who are traditionally been have some of the largest shareholding in the iGaming industry organizations. Do you think there is a way to turn it around? Will individual organizations like Aspire Global be able to be a attractive opportunity for ESG funds? And what does it take?
Take time. Only time.
Yeah.
Only, you know, to show them that you know, through the sustainability report, through the operations, through the constant growth in regulated markets, and the ability also to give up on revenues because you want to be more social, more responsible towards your partners and players. I think that they will not be able to shut their eyes for a very long time from companies that are delivering growth, dividend. At the end, they want also to deliver to their customers or who have they. And dividend, and companies that pay dividend are important. And the gaming companies are paying dividend. So I think in the long term, it will go back, and so I don't see it as a shut door forever.
No, yeah, you know, there's interesting statistic on the ESG side that 1/3 of all funds under management at the moment in the world is under ESG funds, and that equates to something like $40 trillion or something along those lines. And obviously the trend is heading upwards, right? And that has spurred some quite interesting change, you know, to the most least likely organizations in the world to basically take ESG serious as a fundamental part of the organization. I lift this up as an example to bring up Shell, who is an oil and gas company, right? Now, Shell, as an oil and gas company, have committed themselves to be a zero to basically, how do you say, a zero emitted company by 2050. So by 2050 they will be carbon neutral. It's like Shell, like the world leading oil and gas company. Like that's how important it is these days to have an ESG agenda. Because if you don't, then you are left behind, right? And the trends couldn't be more clear, you know.
It's clear,
so it's
and
interesting.
I believe also the US will be there soon in gaming. So it will be also an advantage for the European companies. When they are entering the US, they're already behind it. In front of it. So they will be able to adapt faster than the locally suppliers and operators.
Exactly, because it's like you're saying, Sweden specifically perhaps would, you know, globally 1/3 of all assets under management is ESG driven, but in Sweden particularly that number might be even higher. I'm just speculating now, but what you're saying is that you know, in Sweden has had this ESG agenda it's been on the agenda for longer, let's say, than the US, for example, and that is just a lagging trend in the rest of the world. Yeah, interesting.
I agree.
Yeah. So another thing that I wanted to lift up here as well today, Tsachi, is diversity and inclusion, right? And talk about, you know, trends from the Nordics. I think that is another one that the Nordic region has been leading the way over the last let's say 10, 20, 30, 40 years or so. And in the iGaming industry, it seems very much like the industry is really leading by example with the diversity and the inclusion, because 10 or so years ago, I remember that if you looked at an iGaming organization, you would see, you know, I work for Betsson, and in my team, for example, there were like 15 people and 14 were Swedish, you know, and 14 were predominantly male dominated and so forth. And now that is a trend that is really changing in the industry, and that is talked about a lot. And I would love to hear your thoughts on diversity and inclusion and how you approach it as Aspire Global.
So we, because of the growth pain that we have,
Right.
we didn't have the luxury, and we are not Evolution, and we are not Playtech, and we are not NetEnt, those names that attract the talent in front of the others. We are not there yet. So it triggered us to also here to try and see, okay, there doesn't matter where the employee or the talent is, doesn't matter the gender. You know, even I will give you an example, even without addressing it, because it didn't something that we were thinking of. But if you will take the promotions, the internal promotions in Aspire Global, the female promotions in the last 3 years doubled every year. And this trend of equity and equality was not there 3 years ago. So we started it already there, but not intentionally. Because of the growth pain, because we want good people to be on the wheel. So, you know, we had our head of operation was a male, 9 years in the role. He left to another company. Immediately, we took his report. She's a female, Ruth. She's amazing. And we didn't even think twice if to bring from the outside. So we have in our operation, the head of operation, female, the head of retention, VIP, female, most of the shift managers, female. Amazing. So without taking a lot of initiatives around it, it's already there. And I said in the beginning also with recruitment, doesn't matter where you are, what language you speak, you are able to communicate, you're good enough, you have a good positive state of mind. Come on, let's go. In 5 of the new departments that we launched, the team leader or the manager is one that was only 6 months ago just one of the team. So we are happy to do it. It's for a company that is yet not a strong brand out there. I think it's the only way.
Yeah, you know, just pushing equal opportunity within the organization. That the culture should basically, what you're saying is the culture should be so that we don't care if you're a man or a woman. We don't care where you're from. If you're competent, if you do a great work, we'll do everything we can to give you the platform to grow.
Yes. You know, our compliance officer, the MLRO, it's a female working alone in the UK without an office because she's so good. She's doing it from there. You know, I could have found a man or male that will do it in the office in Malta or Kiev or wherever. No, she's amazing. I don't care that she will do it from there. She's amazing.
Yeah, brilliant. And I love that this is something, you know, that our good friend Lisbeth, she's very passionate for these questions as well. And you know, she wrote to me last week and asked me as well, you know, because in the online event that we organized, there were a lot of talk about diversity and inclusion. And she asked me basically, let's put together, you know, all this discussion that we're happening into kind of one video, and we publish it online, because it is an important discussion to have, you know, because even though you guys, you know, have been able to create this culture within your organization, there could still be biases here and there, and there is questions that we should be aware of, we should talk about them, and we should become better, and so on and so forth. So it's great that you let these voices really be top of the agenda, you know, people like Lisbeth, and give them a platform to discuss these issues. So good work for that, Tsachi.
Thank you.
I respect you for that. As a bit of a rounding off today, perhaps, Tsachi, it's been a great call. We've already chatted for an hour here, by the way. It's amazing, you know, how these things go. But I'd love to ask you as well, just on the trends in general of the iGaming industry. You know, what important trends do you see at the moment in the industry?
So I think there are two trends that are happening. One is in the US market where, as I mentioned before, is a trend of those big operators acquiring their own technology, and it will shape up how the B2B approach to the market will happen. So need to be careful in that aspect. And the second trend that I see is that the European operators doing acquisition in Europe in order to maintain their growth in Europe, because it's not easy to grow without an acquisition because their focus is on the US, or because of the regulation, they have less revenue from the regulated market, so they need to acquire companies in Europe in order to grow. So I see acquisitions of European operators within Europe and acquisition of technology in the US market. This is the two trends that we are identifying right now.
Yeah. So you see the industry heading towards consolidation. Will we see in a couple of years' time that there will be the space is there for the major few organizations?
So there was a panel last week.
I remember.
That I think it was Marco Polo, the founder of Mr. Green. I forgot the name.
Michael Pablo. Yes.
Yes. So he said something very nice. He said, every year we think that this is the year of the consolidation. But I think that the last 12 months showed that it's accelerating. It's boosting up more and more because of the US market and the regulations. So there is, I think, more than what we used to see until now. So I need to answer in the same trend as the last 10 years. I think we are going to have a lot of consolidations in the next 2 years.
All right. That's a great way to end the podcast today, I think. Tsachi, I mentioned it to you before the podcast, but this was long overdue to sit down together. And I hope that we can meet in person again soon as well. It's been a long time, I saw you on the street, but that was a long time ago as well. So thank you for doing this today, and for being open and transparent and sharing your insights, and hopefully I can see you soon. Is there any last word from your end?
No, just thank you very much for supporting the industry and doing a lot of things to expose the industry and the investors into what is happening inside iGaming. Thank you very much for that, Pierre.
Awesome. Absolute pleasure. I'll continue doing it as long as I can.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day.
Thank you so much, Tsachi.
Bye.
Okay, buddy. Bye-bye.